People are going to want you to believe that grief starts after the person dies. And that's just not the fact, because there's something called anticipatory grief. Sometimes grief walks into the room prior to the person dying. I only had to go through that for 2 weeks, but I know there are some of you out there that have anticipatory grief for years. And that's what we're going to talk about today. By the end of this episode, I hope that you leave understanding that the way that you're feeling in your anticipatory grief is so normal. The exhaustion, the heartache, the confusion is normal. Let's talk about it. Anticipatory grief is physically exhausting. I only know anticipatory grief. I think that there's different versions of anticipatory grief, but the one I want to talk about today is the anticipatory grief that someone's going to die. Anticipatory grief, like I said, can come from anything. Like now experiencing loss, I have anticipatory grief in a lot of other areas of my life because I know how sudden and fast loss can occur. But what I'm talking about today is the anticipatory grief that someone's going to pass, right? 2 weeks felt like a lifetime, and it feels like a lifetime. So if 2 weeks for me felt like a lifetime, I'm thinking about all y'all listening that have had to experience years of anticipatory grief from a loved one being sick and watching them deteriorate and watching them become a person that you don't recognize. And also having them recognize that they're changing and they're shifting and all of those things too, and not wanting you to see that version of them. Really, this conversation is stemming from a conversation that we had during our grief circle. This conversation came from two people that came on the grief circle that talked about the anticipatory grief that they experienced in losing their moms because both of their moms had cancer and was sick. And there's so much to unpack here. Anticipatory grief is emotionally exhausting because you're like constantly like on edge. You're waiting for phone calls. You're living in survival mode. Your nervous system's at an all-time high all the time. Like I remember for me, the 2 weeks, every time I would leave the hospital and I wasn't like by my mom's bedside, I had moments like every time my phone rang, I felt my stomach in my ass every time. And so I can't even imagine what it's like to have 3 years of feeling that. Y'all are superheroes. And a huge major shout out to the people that are caregivers to their loved ones that are sick, because I can't even imagine that's its own beast. That's its own thing. You are every single day watching the person you love deteriorate. Whoa. I can't even imagine that. I see you and you are so amazing. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, you're so strong. I believe that you're so strong. I'm not going to say that because we talk about that phrase often, but from somebody who's experienced loss, you're so strong. Another thing about anticipatory grief that a lot of people don't talk about is that hope and grief coexist. They really can be held at the same time. And when it comes to anticipatory grief, this is an interesting one because you can grieve the person that is sick and that has a possibility of dying, while at the same time, you can carry hope that they're going to come out of it and that they're going to be okay. For me, when we were in the hospital with my mom for those 2 weeks, it was so much uncertainty. So much uncertainty. Like the amount of uncertainty that comes with anticipatory grief is unbelievable. There's so much uncertainty. Being in a hospital, so much uncertainty. I have bad juju with hospitals now. At one point, they're better. And then 2 days later, they have COVID. And then 2 days later, their brains suffer too much damage. And then 2 days later, oh, but her eyes opened. Oh, but 2 days later, oh, but her eyes opened, but it was because there is a lot of ups and downs. I think specifically, Maddie, shout out to my girl, talked about how that type of grief is such a roller coaster when your loved one's sick, because there's highs and there's really high highs and there's really low lows, and anticipatory grief and hope and grief existing at the same time proves just that you can hope that they get better while at the same time you're grieving the possibility that they're not going to be here anymore. And that can be really exhausting. Another thing about anticipatory grief is that the world doesn't really validate it. You can feel grief like, oh my gosh, like my loved one's going to die. They're just like actually still here and they're just in the process of dying. And the world doesn't see that as grief a lot of the time. Oh, well, they're still here. Like you still have them here. It's not necessarily directly invalidating your grief, but it definitely is making it feel like it's not as valid as it would be if your person were dead. I think people expect things out of you that are very different than what they would expect out of you if your person was not here any longer. Anticipatory grief and grief comes with very different expectations of the person experiencing those things. And anticipatory grief is different for everyone. I've written down some adjectives that I felt like my experience were like, and my experience looked fast. It looked traumatic. It was only 2 weeks. It was a lot of hospital waiting rooms. She was in a coma. It was very sudden uncertainty. And other people's experience with anticipatory grief can be like years of caregiving and dementia and cancer, maybe addiction, degenerative illness, slowly losing pieces of someone over time. Anticipatory grief can look very different from one place to another. And I just want to say that I don't know what it's like to have prolonged anticipatory grief, but I do know that my 2 weeks of anticipatory grief came with several gray hairs. I think something else is that sudden loss doesn't give you time to prepare, when prolonged loss gives you a lot of time to prepare. Not only time to prepare, but it makes you prepare over and over and over and over and over again. With every scan, with every appointment, with every phone call, every bad feeling, over and over and over and over and over again. Prolonged loss forces you to prepare. And that's a really big difference that I didn't really experience either. I had no time to prepare. And anticipatory grief can feel like emotional whiplash, numbness, panic, disassociation, exhaustion, hypervigilance, inability to focus, maybe guilt, anger, bargaining, loneliness. Then you have caregiver grief, grieving while still having to perform, managing appointments, advocating medically for someone, handling logistics, suppressing emotions to really survive, maybe feeling guilty for feeling burnout, and then grieving someone before they're gone too, right? Like you're mourning pieces of somebody that are still here. And like I said, I don't know this personally, but what I do know is during the conversation with the grief circle, I was able to talk to two individuals who talked about how no one should have to watch their loved one die from cancer, because what they look like in their final days is like, I think that she described it as outer worldly, I believe is the adjective that she used. And that's a piece of loss that, I mean, I had to watch my mom in a coma with like tubes and, but like I never had to watch her completely deteriorate. And there's its own set of grief in that. And so I want to give you some practical steps that I believe would have helped me in my anticipatory grief. Reminder, I give it every time and I will continue to give it every time. The only major practical step, if you take none away from me ever, the one that you should always take is that none of this is accomplished without the help of a therapist. So do that. Do it. I know it's difficult. I know it's hard to find. I get it. Now that that's out of the way, practical step number 1, name it. What you're experiencing is grief. The world might not let you see it as grief, and the world might not validate it in the same way that they would validate it if your person was not here any longer. But anticipatory grief is grief. So number 1, name it and own it. Number 2, stop judging yourself for contradictory emotions. Okay? It's okay to be really sad and heartbroken and grieving heavily over the fact that they're dying, while at the same time feeling relief that they're not going to be sick anymore. It is okay to laugh sometimes. It's okay to feel numb. It's okay to feel exhausted. Contrary emotions are normal in anticipatory grief. Feel them. All the emotions. Emotions are blessings, okay? So feel all of them. They're going to contradict each other. Grief is messy like that. And the last one I'll leave you with is preserve your person outside of their illness, if you can. Ask them questions. Record their voice. Take pictures. Even if they don't look the way that they looked before. You'll be really happy that you did. Anyways, listen. Anticipatory grief is grief, all right? You're not feeling crazy for feeling multiple emotions at the same time. That's kind of a part of it. And one more time, to all of you out there that are caregivers, to all of you out there that are watching your loved ones deteriorate from an illness, I see you. I'm really sad that this is something that you have to walk through, but I'm really proud of you for doing it and finding the strength through it. It's not an easy thing. By the way, we released all of my poems in an ebook. If you didn't know, I started this journey of healing through grief through poetry. And I started posting those poems on TikTok, and everyone hears them now. And everyone's like, when's it going to be in a book? Well, it is now. And you can find the link to purchase that down below. And I'm always open to feedback. So let me know what you think. I'm proud of you. We're doing it. Grief is messy and it's hard, but I'm very grateful to be doing it together. Subscribe to our channels if you haven't already, and we'll talk next week. All right. Can't wait. Love you. Bye.